This NCFE Learner Toolkit recording is on understanding the NCFE mark scheme. Here is an example of the NCFE mark scheme. The first box in grey contains the required answer, and then the remaining rows in white show the method or mark breakdown to achieve this. There's clear labelling of whether the question is UPS underpinning skills or PS problem solving. And there are two columns that separate key information. So that's the process and then any additional information. So we really are looking for ways to award the marks, which is why you've got so much detail in the mark schemes. We also provide the subject content statement that will be assessed. So if you are marking your own work, you're looking at some questions and marking your own work, then try to think about the subject content statements that you're doing particularly well in, and also the subject content statements that you are successively getting incorrect answers. So obviously that's an area of challenge for you and something that you need to focus your revision on. At the front of every mark scheme, there are abbreviations. So it explains what the annotation is and the explanation. So FT means follow through marks. So this is when your answer from a previous step, it might be an incorrect answer, but what you've done next with it, the process that you followed is correct. So follow through, we do allow those marks. OE stands for or equivalent. So that is if you've presented the answer differently. So for example, if in the mark scheme it says 0.5, but you've written a half, then both would be acceptable. CAO, correct answer only, so that mark would be awarded just for correct answer only. There refers to your own derived values from a correct method or from an attempt at a correct method. Seen refers to the requirement to see the stated value in your response or working out. Something in brackets in the mark scheme means that it's not necessary. You don't have to show that for your final answer in order to gain the mark. And if you see square brackets used in the mark scheme, then that usually means that answers within a range are acceptable. So for example, if you were looking at a graph, sometimes your answers may be within a range that you then work with. And anything in the mark scheme that's shaded gives you an indication of the requirements for full marks to be awarded. This example is taken from the decoding recording that's also in the Learner Toolkit playlist that you can take a look at. So I'll read the question out and we've got an answer there. So Jessie is the manager of a shopping centre. She plans to let this unit. And we've already highlighted the key information there. She has information about the floor areas of other available units in the shopping centre. So we've got a table showing those. Jessie thinks that the unit she will let has a floor area 12% larger than the median floor area of the other available units. Is she correct? Show how you decide. So 5 marks available. Here's our answer, and I'm going to show you this against the mark scheme. So here's the mark scheme. You can see we've got 5 marks in total. It's PS problem solving, and you certainly have to show working in order to gain all 5 marks. So let's have a little look. The first mark is awarded here for calculating the area of the space that Jessie is going to let. So we've seen we could actually get an incorrect answer here. So that's 74. In order to gain the first mark, we're not gaining the first mark for getting the 74 meters squared. We're gaining the first mark for the method of calculating the area of the rectangle and then calculating the area of the triangle. But any method to work out the area of the triangle or trapezium would be fine. The next mark comes from the correct area, 74 meters squared, so that's brilliant. We've got the first 2 marks. The next mark comes from identifying 67.6. So you don't need to write median equals 67.6, but you could even circle it in the question. That would be fine. But as long as it's clear to the examiner that you've identified that the median is 67.6, that is fine. Now for the next mark, let's have a little look. So what we have done is we've increased that median by 12%. And you can see here, this method will be 67.6 times 1.12. That would give us the answer. Or the adding together gives us the answer. Or if another way of going about this would be to take the 74 and reduce that by 12%. So there's different ways around of going about this. We're getting the mark because our method is accepted there, and we've reached the answer of 75.712. But even if we'd made a misstep in our calculations, writing the 6.76 plus 0.676 plus 0.676 would give us a method for increasing the median by 12%, and we would get that. That OE or equivalent shows us that we would get that. So there's lots of different ways that we can have achieved this mark, and thankfully we have achieved it. So that's great. So we've got 4 marks so far. And then our final mark, we've written no. And we have written 74 is less than 75.712, but as long as somewhere within our working we've got that 75.712 and the 74, and we've written the words no, then that is fine. Although if we had written down here no and the increase, the 8.112 and the 6.4, that would also be accepted. So there's lots of different ways of gaining all 5 of those marks. Here is a different question. So we'll take a look at this. We'll mark this one. So Pavel has this scale drawing of the festival area. It's made up of a trapezium and a semicircle. He needs to order fencing to go around the festival area. He'll leave gaps totaling 65 meters for the gates. Fencing comes in rolls, 50 meters in length. How many rolls does Pavel need for the festival area? Use pi equals 3.14. So we always tell you what to use for pi. And the demand of the question here is how many rolls does Pavel need? So we've got that. So our learner has a sensible method. They're going to underline some key information. So they're going to calculate, it tells us it's fencing to go around. So we want the edges. We don't want to calculate the area this time. We're looking at around the edge. And we've got that semicircle there. It's fencing. And there are gaps that we need to think about for the gates. And we know how many rolls, we know how long the rolls are. So let's turn to our working. So this is what our learner's done. So they've done the 7 plus 7 plus 4.5 gives them 18.5. What have they then done? They've used the scale. Okay, so that's great. So they've done the 18.5 times 20,000. Okay. Then what have they done here? 3.14. So they've used pi. Now what we really need to do, we need to use pi d. So we need the circumference of a circle, and then we need to half it. But it looks like our learner has they've used the formula for area. Area equals pi r squared, and they've used 6, which is the diameter. They've used that as the radius. So the formula is wrong. So there's an issue there. So this answer here is going to be incorrect. Then they've applied the scale. Okay, that's a good thing that they've done the scale. But we know that this answer here, 113.04, that is not the circumference of that half of that semicircle. Okay. Oh, and then they've added them together. Okay. Now, what are we doing? Oh, look, they've divided it by 100 because they know they're looking at meters. and then they're removing the gate, so they're minusing, subtracting 65 meters, and then they're dividing it by 50 to give them the number of rolls, and then they've put their final answer. How many rolls do they need? 524.86. Okay, that answer doesn't make sense because I'm assuming that you can't buy 0.86 of a roll. They'd probably need to round it up. So let's see. Let's see against the mark scheme. So we know this question is not completely correct for certain. We know that we've seen some errors. Let's see how we can mark it. So here's the mark scheme, and we'll take a look. Now, the first mark can be awarded because the learner has shown that they've used scale and they've also converted to meters. So we've seen the multiplication by 20,000. We also saw it here, but we can only award it once. So they've done the times 20,000 and they've divided by 100. So any of the measurements that they did there would give them this mark. So that's great. Now, the second mark is for finding the circumference of the semicircle, but we cannot award that mark because the learner used an incorrect formula for area. They've used pi times diameter squared instead of pi r squared, and what they really should have done is looked at pi times diameter, because that's the formula for the circumference, and then they should have halved it, so we can't get that mark. The third mark is for adding together the calculated lengths of the perimeter of the shape, but it has to include a correct method to find the semi-circumference. So even though that, yes, we can see that they've done the addition there together, they did not gain the circumference mark, and due to this mark scheme very clearly says it must come from the correct method to find semi-circumference, and they haven't got that, so we can't give them that mark. The fourth mark is for subtracting 65 meters for the entrances and then dividing by 50 to find out how many rows of fencing. And yes, they have done that. They have subtracted by 65 and they have then divided by 50, but it does say there, whatever their answer is, so their 524.86 must come from correct method for full perimeter in actual dimensions, but they didn't get the correct method for full perimeter. So unfortunately, this mark can't be awarded. And then the final answer is, it says correct answer only, 111 rolls. They didn't get 111 rolls, so we can't award that mark. So in total, this learner has got 1 out of 5 marks, but they could have gained more if they'd have remembered the formula for the circumference of a circle and then halved it, but at least we have been able to award them 1 mark for correctly converting to meters and using the scale given. So I hope this does help you to understand the mark scheme so you can practice and mark your own answers accurately. Thank you very much for listening to this recording or watching this recording. I wish you the best of luck in your assessments. Thank you.